As a child, I was decidedly anti-vegetable. I mounted a staunch resistance against my mother's best efforts to get me to eat things like spinach, beets, and rhubarb. I was told I was being fussy. It turns out, though, that I may well have had the nutritional high ground. I, for one, and no doubt many of you watching, have been hearing increasing claims of health gains through eating more meat and less plant-based diets. With oxalate, a substance found in nuts, seeds, leafy green vegetables, and other places, being linked to varied bodily dysfunction. The most recognized, of course, and medically accepted being kidney stones. Today we'll look beyond this, though, to the gut problems like irritable bowel syndrome, joint inflammation, including gout, and even anxiety connection to oxalate overload. To lay out this web of dietary consequence for us is Sally Norton, one of America's most prominent voices on oxalate danger. Sally is a graduate of Cornell University and she holds a master's degree in public health. Now she'll highlight the signs of oxalate overload, including those seen in the urine. She'll explain whether a carnivore diet is the best way to go, and she'll lay out some tasty and nutritious substitutes for some of the highest oxalate foods. Welcome to Vital Signs, where we learn how to get healthier from all angles, from the biochemical and nutritional to the things we do that nourish our minds and our souls. I'm Brendon Fallon.
True for them. It's great.
And I imagine that it would be quite an individualized thing. Back to the joint inflammation issue that I mentioned before, I know that gout is quite a common complaint. And this was one of the things I heard coming through from the carnivore community, that they were experiencing a reduction in gout in some cases. I know that often it's advised to stop drinking alcohol as a way to reduce gout. So it seems unexpected that stopping things like nuts and vegetables would also bring a reduction in gout. How might this come about?
Yeah, it does seem out of left field because we're taught that gout is eating a lot of meat and a lot of alcohol. And like, old guys get it. But in fact, gout is a generalized inflammatory issue affecting cells, often where you get this periodic nature to it, where it can be really bad for a while and then you get a little break and it kind of randomly hits you. Gout is just a generalized term, but now in clinical medicine, we think of it as uric acid gout, and because we have a drug for that, we blame uric acid. But when there's something going on in the joint space or in the connective tissues that make up the joint that's bothering the immune system, this is a crystalline problem when we call it gout. And there's 5 or 6 kinds of crystals that irritate the immune system and cause immune engagement. And immune engagement brings in swelling and heat and pain and bothers the nerves while it's acting. And it'll try for a while and then it'll decide, this isn't working, and we'll stop. And so usually you get it coming and going and coming and going. And oxalate is in the food, like you mentioned, the nuts and certain vegetables, not all vegetables, but we're eating enough of it now in today's diet that it can collect in the joint spaces, and commonly does. It can affect the tendons, the cartilage, the synovial fluid of the joint, the bones themselves, the bone marrow. So all that connective tissue is potentially at risk for accumulation of these little crystals. It's the same crystal that oxalic acid is forming with calcium that makes up a kidney stone. So it's like you're getting little itty bitty kidney stones in your joint spaces.
Yeah, so you mentioned the kidney stone issue. That's another one that I know factors into this. In terms of this, I've heard that getting a lot of lemon juice is something that can reduce the kidney stone problem. Kidney stones, I understand, is largely a problem of uric acid, and I've heard that drinking lemon juice is something that can reduce this problem. Where would the oxalates that you're talking about fit into this equation?
That's interesting that kidney stone has a reputation as a uric acid stone problem, where gout definitely does. But 80% of all kidney stones are made primarily of oxalic acid bound to calcium.
80%?
80%, yeah. So oxalate is the true kidney stone. When a doctor says you have calcium stones, they mean oxalate stones. And the body will use uric acid, which can be to help dissolve the crystals in your joints. And so uric acid can go up and you get a combination of uric acid and calcium oxalate stones in the stones or in the urine, and you can see both of them elevated. Chances are it's the oxalic acid exposure that's excessive that's stimulating that whole problem. And the citric acid that's in your lemon juice is very high in citric acid, has citric acid is this ion that connects with calcium just like oxalate does. So oxalic acid and citric acid both like calcium. And the bond between citric acid is so strong with calcium that it helps to soften the oxalate stone. So the oxalate's made of oxalic acid and calcium. Along comes the citric acid, and the citric acid turns that oxalate stone, which is hard like quartz, think of it as glass, turns it more like chalk and softens it. It makes it much easier for the body to kind of remove it, soften it, and move it out. It's really helpful for basically dissolving your hard glass-like oxalate grit anywhere in your body, including your kidneys and bladder, with the citric acid. They say in the literature about a half cup a day will help you prevent and even reverse kidney stones.
Lemon juice being, I guess, one thing in an arsenal of a strategy that can be used to reduce the effects of oxalates. And I want to get into this a bit later with you, Sally, like a kind of harm reduction strategy for people who are going to still eat oxalates anyway. Probably the majority of people are going to continue eating a certain amount of oxalates, so what can we actually do to minimize the effects? That's what I'd like to explore with you later. And another big part of this, I understand, is gut health. And I know that this is something that, one of the problems that you personally experienced that led to your discovery of oxalates as a health concern, along with joint pain and other issues. Perhaps you could provide a snapshot of your experience with this, Sally, and specifically what led you to believe that oxalates was the main issue.
Well, I didn't recognize oxalate was a main issue in my health until I was 49 going on 50. But in retrospect, once I understood how to change my diet effectively and see this reversal, it's pretty stunning to see that probably my childhood problems with ear infections and strep infections were oxalate related. I started having joint problems and back pain when I was 12, including some weird neuro stuff going on. And then I had problems with my feet and broken bones that didn't recover. And I had severe arthritis through my 20s. And let's see, it was 1990. I developed severe irritable bowel syndrome that just never went away. And it became later a problem with chronic belching, bloating, and even hiccups. And it turns out that all those things are neurological in nature. It's part of the neurotoxicity that looks like a GI symptom. So you might think of it as, you know, some kind of bacterial imbalance or overgrowth because of all the bloating and belching and so on. But it might, in fact, be oxalate causing a dysregulation of the way the muscles work in the gut. So oxalic acid, and when you're eating plants like spinach.
To see that full interview and others on how to optimize health, go to ept.ms/vital signs.